Welcome back to the Reier on YouTube channel. It is TR in the AM on a Monday morning, January the 26th, 2026. So it's 1/26, 2026. There you go. That type of trivial information that you come to expect from right here on the Reier on YouTube channel. A lot to get into this morning. We're going with a little bit of an earlier start. We had tried the mid-morning approach with TR in the AM. We're going to go back to some early here. Plenty to get into. Alabama men's hoops over the weekend, a second straight home loss for Nate Oates' team, this time at the hands of the rival Tennessee Volunteers. 5 straight now in the series for Rick Barnes and the Vols over Alabama. There's a little bit of a stretch there early on where it was more Alabama and Nate Oates, and this thing is flipped in favor of the Big Orange of late. That's 2 straight losses to UTs, too, in Tuscaloosa. Saying that 3 times real quick. Texas a couple Saturdays ago, and then Tennessee this past Saturday. Alabama now, similar to the loss to Texas, going to have to make it up somewhere else when you drop the home games. And the problem with that is that you don't have, let's say, road games at, Oklahoma, like you had a week ago or so, or, other places in the league that might seem a little more attractive, a little more conducive to road success. I mean, you still got to go back to Tennessee later in the season. You got to go to Auburn. You got to go to Ole Miss. So there are some tough places to go. You got to go to Florida end of this week. Sunday early tip. I like that for Alabama more so in an early situation on a Sunday than, say, the Rowdy Reptiles being able to get into that place or get ready for that type of situation. That's always a tough place to play. Although Auburn made it look kind of easy over the weekend after Todd Golden talked his talk. Todd Golden talked his talk about the Charles Bediako situation, and Alabama said, we'll beat them anyway, Todd said, and then proceeded to go out and fall to the Auburn Tigers there in Hogtown. So we'll talk some hoops. We'll talk some Alabama football as well. Is Alabama on the verge of a replacement for Chis Kapilovic on that offensive line as far as a coach? We'll get into some thoughts on that entire situation as well. Probably get into some offensive side of the ball thoughts here on a Monday morning while we're at it. And we'll also take your comments right here in the show chat. And we've already got a couple of you chiming in. Joe Webb says morning. Good morning, Joe. And then our good friend Bama Bob always chiming in. How's it going, Bob? How's it going? Happy Monday to you as well. But yeah, for Alabama men's hoops, big 24 hours or so coming up as it relates to Charles Bediako and his continued eligibility for the Crimson Tide. A preliminary injunction will be needed by Charles to continue to play for Nate Oates' team. I thought he looked good, in his first action or his first return to action. Kind of felt like senior night for Charles on Saturday night. The ovation he received from the home crowd, and then the performance that he had. 13 points. You didn't get as much from Aiden Sherrill this time around in the post, so you needed it from Charles Bediako. And without Amari Allen, without Aiden Holloway, it was difficult for the guards other than LeBaron Philon. LeBaron did his best, I thought, to carry this team down the stretch and really throughout the game with 26 points. Reitzel gave you enough in the first half with 11. Then in the second half, he only has 3. And, I just continue to worry with Reitzel that, the legs and the health of Latrell Reitzel can continue to be an issue, because every time he goes down, every time there's even a slippage, you kind of hold your breath, right? With the potential for the Achilles and things like that going on with him. Houston Millette gives you just 2 points on 2 shots. You kind of anticipate getting out rebounded at this point, night in and night out. That was the case once again. I didn't think second chance points or getting crushed on the defensive glass was a real problem for Alabama in this game. But it was going to require a defensive effort similar to what they got in the first half. They weren't able to get that in the second half. When you think about Tennessee and the guys that they have to get it from, they got it from Nate Ammett. 29 points for that outstanding freshman. Just a really tough matchup. He is a guy with his size and versatility. You could envision Amari Allen, who didn't play in the game for Alabama, being a factor against him. And then Jacoby Gillespie goes for 24. So 53 combined from really Tennessee's top two players. They got what they needed on the road to get the job done. And again, for Alabama, other than LeBaron Philon, Reitzel with 14, again, 11 of those in the first half, and really just not enough. 17 bench points, 13 of those came from Bediako. So between Bethea, Jemison, and Noah Williamson, it was minimal. 4 points between those three guys off the bench. For Alabama, try to pick up the pieces. You got to get back to securing home court. That'll start tomorrow. Quick turnaround to tomorrow night, and the Missouri Tigers visiting Coleman Coliseum. Going to be an interesting day on Tuesday, isn't it? With the Bediako continuation there, seeing what his status is for this team going into Missouri tomorrow night and beyond. You know, it sounded like a very festive atmosphere at Coleman Coliseum with Bediako over the weekend. That's going to change coming up in Gainesville too. Oof. Can be a rough fan base to deal with down there on the road. And so that's where, if Charles is eligible to go, it could get a little spicy in relation to his eligibility down there in Gainesville. Unknown Damone. Unknown Damone is questioning the practices of Alabama men's hoops. It just seems like, according to Unknown Damone, this team struggles to get through practices in one piece right now. He says, please stop the prison rules practicing, getting after it, hard hatting during the practice week. Hey, you got to practice who you are, right? CC chiming in says, you got to wonder why Bama leads the nation or is right up there in game minutes missed. It's been rough. Every game, it's like different folks that you're seeing on that availability report. It's must read Alabama's hoops availability report, because you just never know at this point. We'll see. It sounds like Holloway. I would think Holloway and or Allen will be back for Missouri. You need everybody you can get when you go down to Gainesville, because before that loss to Auburn over the weekend, the Gators really looked like they were starting to find it. That Florida front line is going to be a lot. I mean, they got dudes, and they brought back a lot from their national championship team from a year ago. Absolute dudes, three guys really, that you think about among the best in the SEC when it comes to size. The guards for Florida have been better of late, maybe not so much against Auburn, but they had been rounding into form in the backcourt after the significant losses of that trio from that national championship squad in 2024, 2025, that season a year ago. So again, let's get into some football talk here on a Monday morning. A lot of reports out there. I guess these started with Bama Online and also On3, that Adrien Klemm, the likely, are the targeted successor at this point for Chis Kapilovic. We haven't spoken here on the channel since the decision to part ways with Chis Kapilovic. I talked about it, though, on Second Helping last week with our good friend Brent Beard. We got into a little bit of the staff projections for teams around the SEC, got specific with Alabama. And the thing that I kept going back to with Chis Kapilovic is that you brought back a very seasoned, a very experienced, and a very encouraging offensive line for 2025. And so the expectations were really, really high for that group. I mean, we were hearing Joe Moore Award, those type of things. Safe to say Alabama didn't come close to reaching that level or fulfilling that sort of potential in this most recent season. So with that in mind, if you're going to go through a revamp, are you really going to bring back the overseer of a group that, by pretty much unanimous opinion, underachieved. Now, we can talk about levels of underachievement if you want. You want to get into that. Bottom line is they underachieved, massively underachieved, somewhat underachieved. You can get into sort of the particulars of that. Bottom line, they weren't good enough. They just weren't good enough, especially in the run game. And I know we can talk, neither was a running back situation. And so you can say, well, what about Rob Gillespie in that scenario? Well, the thing about Rob Gillespie is I've seen Alabama at the running back position perform up to a level of at least acceptability where Alabama standards are concerned. I didn't see that, and I didn't really envision that happening under Chis Kapilovic for whatever reason. And so the decision was made to move on. I guess it was presented in some ways as almost a mutual parting away. There is no mutual parting of ways when it comes to a place like Alabama. And I'm not saying Chis Kapilovic won't have opportunities. I'm sure he will. His resume doesn't start or end with Alabama. I'm just saying it wasn't probably the right thing for the Crimson Tide at this particular time. So is it going to be Adrien Klemm? That's what you're hearing from the likes of Chris Lowe and On3 and Bama Online, at least in terms of where it appears to be headed right now. We'll see. Adrien Klemm, one thing we do like about Adrien Klemm is that we are, as you can see right here over my shoulder, see that? Hawaii. We're big Hawaii people here on TR and the AM. Adrien Klemm, a University of Hawaii product, played for June Jones. So some run and shoot in his background. Remember, June had some matchups against Alabama back in the day. He got Shula that first time around, right? And then brought Hawaii to Tuscaloosa. Remember that home game in Tuscaloosa with Hawaii? Gosh, that's been what, 20 years ago or so? Man, they did the haka dance and the sort of pregame ritual right there on the playing surface at what is now Saban Field. But Klemm, a guy who has sort of traveled the trails of coaching. He's been at SMU. He has been at UCLA. He has been at Oregon. 2022, you look at Oregon's rushing offense, not a great year for Oregon in terms of record by their standard. I think they were 10-3 in 2022, but the offensive line play under Klemm was a positive. He's been with the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's been with the New England Patriots, played for the New England Patriots, won 3 world titles under Bill Belichick. So you like where he comes from. It kind of aligns with even the previous regime. You know, there's some Belichick in there. There is some Dan Lanning in there that kind of falls under that Saban tree a little bit. So, we'll see how that plays out. Again, with Kapilovic, it was just difficult to imagine a return based on the underachievement of a capable and experienced group from this past season. Now you're going to go into a revamp. The confidence level, I got to think, just was not quite there. Let's see here, right here in the show chat. Stephen Burton, he says, good morning. Good morning, Stephen. Joe chiming in, said, bottom line, the OL was a total failure. Stephen chiming in here. Stephen with a V. We've got Stephen with a PH. I don't know if he's got a PH degree, but he's got a PH. Stephen with a V here. I do think the Klemm hire will be a good hire, or I feel in my gut that it'll be better than Cap. Well, we'll see how it plays out. Alabama on that offensive line, again, a lot to sort through. And so a major undertaking for Klemm or whoever the next guy is to follow Chis Kapilovic. Stephen with a V with more says, and that's just looking at his resume, and sacks allowed was down on all his O-lines. Yeah, I mean, you know what helps sacks going down too when you can run the football, at least somewhat effectively. That really helps with your protection, helps get guys open, helps obviously with play action. So that would be a very good thing to kind of marry the run game more so into this offense. And that, in part, would certainly, I would think, help your play action and your pass protection. CC, going back to Bediako here, says, so ridiculous, Bediako. So many teams have pros who played longer at a higher level and made way more money in EuroLeague. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty become rampant across college basketball with the Europeans or the European pros. So this isn't anything exclusive to Alabama with Bediako. I guess where the difference has been underscored is that Charles signed what could be deemed as an NBA deal, although it was more of a two-way deal. But to me, a high-level pro is a high-level pro. You know, if you're making $500,000 in Europe, you're making more than Charles Bediako made in G League. So, yeah. It's basically the NCAA at this point crying out to help from Washington to kind of get this figured out. Steven says on the timeline of the cap decision that DeBoer got through the portal, got the players he wanted and cut Cap loose. You know, that's why even a week ago, I know folks saw Cap out on the trail recruiting and thought, wow, he's coming back. That isn't always indicative of coaches coming back. We've seen it in the past, kind of to Stephen with a PH's point here, in that in the previous era of college football, you'd get through that late signing period and then you would see staff changes. You'd get to the only signing period when it was the first Wednesday in February. You'd get through that, get your class, then you would see the coaching turnover. That's why I wasn't convinced, just because Cap was out on the trail, that he was sure to return in 2026. I mean, go back 20 years or so. I've talked to coaches that were out on the trail at 10 o'clock at night, and at midnight, that entire staff had been fired in the period of 2 hours. You know, been on the phone with an Alabama assistant out on the road nearly in the middle of the night, and then get a call at midnight that they're all gone. You know, they're all fired. Stephen with a V says Auburn Jokic played in Europe. Not a thing said. Do we really want the line at what country we played pro? Yeah, I agree. I think high level pro. Now, there are certainly different levels of pro basketball once you get over into Europe. So I do take that into account somewhat. But if you're a high level pro and you're playing college basketball, there isn't really any of a difference to me than, say, you know, G League. So Bediako's situation still going to play out here in the next 24 hours or so in terms of his future. Alabama will welcome Missouri to Coleman Coliseum, go to Florida on Sunday. And again, those road opportunities that they had previously, like going to Starkville and going to Norman. Not that there's really any easy road games in the SEC, just in terms of the process of going on the road and then winning. It can be very difficult, but it ramps up because you go to Gainesville. Then you get Bucky. What about Bucky coming to Tuscaloosa midweek next week? Bucky McMillan, the former Mountain Brook High School coach, then on to Samford. Now, Texas A&M in first place in the league, right? It's going to get tougher for A&M. A&M's about to get into the meat of their schedule too. But Bucky returns to Bama next week, Wednesday night. That's going to be an early tip. That's 6 o'clock on a Wednesday for Bucky McMillan. And then Alabama goes to Auburn. We talked about the road games that are still out there. Oxford will not be easy with Chris Beard and the Rebels. Really, when you look at it right now with the remaining road games at LSU, February 21st seems most winnable. I think Alabama can win all these road games too, by the way. Tennessee is going to be tough. You got a back-to-back in late February, early March, where you go Tennessee on a Saturday, February 28th. Leap year? No, that's 29th, right? Tennessee on the 28th, and then turn around that next Tuesday and go to Athens to take on a much-improved Georgia team. So nothing easy the rest of the way, and not going to be much in the way of sympathy for this Alabama team, especially if Charles Bediako continues to be a part of the equation. Shifting back now to some football, because we talked about maybe some overall thoughts kind of as it relates to the Alabama offense. You've seen a couple of high school additions here of late for Alabama at the wide receiver position. Just in terms of numbers, you needed guys. And also, something you got to take into account, maybe more so where this late period is going to be concerned in the future in the RIV sharing and NIL era of college athletics, is you're probably going to take more developmental guys late. And just unless you find a Josh Jacobs type late. And even in that situation, it could kind of play out that way. More developmental type guys, and also guys that you don't have to really pay other than a scholarship. That's the reality of it. You can't have, nearly 100 guys or so that are all making at least somewhat significant money in the sharing that we've got going on. You're going to have some just straight scholarship guys, and you're going to have some guys that are just thrilled to be there on scholarship, and understanding that, they're going to maybe be a year, 2 years. And if they surprise you, great. Maybe one of these guys comes in and in 2026, they're a top 6 guy in the rotation. But first of all, you needed to fill out your room from a wide receiver standpoint, and also the economics. And it's kind of like in the NFL, I've heard it compared, and I think it's a great comp to, you're going to have some undrafted free agent types. You're going to have some 7th round types. And I think that's what you're going to see. And not just at wide receiver, but look, if there's a 6'7", 280 pound, 270 pound offensive tackle out there that isn't quite 300, 310 as of yet, that you can kind of come to an agreement that, you're going to come in here and it's going to be a couple years on the front end. It's going to be more along the lines of what we've seen previously for a developmental position like the offensive line. That's what I could envision for positions like that, like offensive line, and more of those that even quarterback. I think you're already seeing it in this class with the 2 quarterback class from the high school level. I could see Tamala being a paid guy, but, maybe not in terms of both those guys. Unknown Damone chiming in here. Senior Bowl week, Bama down to 3 players in the start of Mardi Gras in Mobile. Wild times in Mobtown. Absolutely. Senior Bowl week. Is it what it used to be? I have seen, I think Ruben Bain from Miami is going to participate. So that's good. It had gotten to the point where so many of these guys, especially if they had first round grades, and even with the Senior Bowl extending the eligibility to non-seniors, like redshirt juniors, or as long as you had completed your degree, I guess. It's always a fun week, though, down in Mobile for Senior Bowl. Been down and done that for a couple of times. You get into downtown Mobile during the practice week, you'll see anybody and everybody. You'll see Jerry Jones. You'll see people like that and dive bars and telling stories. You'll see college football head coaches sort of mixed in there too, or at least you used to. It's a little publicized much now these days. But yeah, this Alabama offense in terms of, kind of looking ahead, and this Alabama offense of line, if it is Klemm, I've said this before on the channel, you can't just be a developer anymore. You got to be an expedited developer. And I know Alabama has added some SEC experience to this offensive line mix here of late. We've talked about those on previous episodes of TR in the AM. But you're going to have to be able to nuke it. You're going to have to be able to microwave it more and more. We're bringing guys together who previously had no interaction, and at an area where we've heard so much that continuity is king, you're going to have to speed up that process. And so whether it's Adrien Klemm or whoever, that's going to be the task, because really, I know you're bringing in Racing Delgatti at the center position, a veteran type guy that you hope you can plug and play right there with that experience. But yeah, Michael Carroll, and then, you get into these transfers from Texas, and Ole Miss, and Javen Jones coming in from Mississippi State, perhaps at left tackle, Ty Haywood, how much can you take him above where he comes to you from the University of Michigan? So a lot to figure out on that offensive line. Running back, I think it's kind of the same situation, the continuation. It is a huge year, I think, for Rob G in terms of AK Deer. And I'm not saying that you prioritize one player over the other in your room, but I think the court of public opinion where Rob Gillespie is concerned is going to be, what does AK Deer bring to this running back mix in 2026? Unless EJ Crowell just comes in and it doesn't really matter, and he's just such a fabulous freshman that it sort of overshadows a lot of the other guys in that room. Looking at it right now in late January and thinking ahead to spring practice and on through the summer program and those things, AK Deer is that guy in the running back room, especially since Hollywood Smothers ended up at Texas. He's the guy that's got to come along because he is different. He's different from what you've got pretty much at the running back position. Anything else, gang, before we get out of here on a Monday morning? Yeah. I mean, that's pretty standard, CC, who says Kapilovic recruited right up to his official ouster. It's sort of, I mean, probably a poor analogy, but it's sort of like some of the mobster movies you see, where you're the last to know a lot of times, and you can think everything's status quo. And then even if your gut tells you a little bit, it might not be. The lights can go out pretty quickly. It's tough profession, man. I know the money's great. I know we all look at the multi-year deals now and those type of things and think, boy, what a life. But it's week to week for most of these guys, even with the multi-year deals, because they'll buy you out in a heartbeat. That is the saving grace in all this for some of these guys. Now, with Kapilovic, I don't know if he still had another year on his deal or if he was at the end of a 2-year deal. Usually the way those contracts work, if you're going into your last year of a deal now at a place like Alabama, you're going to have at least another year on the other side. So, not exactly sure how that's working for Cap. Hey, thanks as always for joining us right here on Reier on YouTube. Hit the like button if you don't mind. A like would help us out. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't subscribed to the channel. I know the data supports that most of you who watch aren't subscribers. So let's fix that. Hit the subscribe button, hit that notification bell. That way you're alerted to our content as it drops right here on Reier on YouTube. And again, a thumbs up, we would appreciate it. Have a great rest of your Monday. Have a great week, everybody. We'll be back real soon right here on Reier on YouTube. And until next time, so long, everybody.